Welcome to the sixth lecture in the series on policy and governance in the Palestinian camps. My name is Tara Mahfoud, and I coordinate the program at the Issam Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs. Now, I'm very happy to introduce Sahar Atrache, who is an analyst for International Crisis Group in Lebanon. She is the author of the latest ICG report titled Nurturing Instability, Lebanon's Palestinian Refugee Camps, which will be the topic of our discussion today. The report's available online on the ICG website as well as the IFI website if you're interested. Also joining us today is Nadim Shehadi, an associate fellow at Chatham House. He's been working on Palestinian refugees, and actually just recently a report's been published on the regional perspective of Palestinian refugees. It's also available on the Chatham House website if you're interested. Okay, Sahar will be giving a brief presentation for about 20 to 30 minutes. Following that, there will be a discussion by Nadim Shehadi, and then we'll open the floor for discussion and questions. Okay, join me in welcoming them.
Well, thank you. I just want to say that I'm what we say in the ICG, I'm the lead author because we have an editing, very tough editing system, so many high level in the ICG participated in editing this report. So the title of our report that was published in last February is Nurturing Instability, the Palestinian Refugee Camp in Lebanon. I know many would not really like the title, but during my presentation, you will really know why we chose this title. I just also want to make just one remark that I'm not going to give a full presentation of the report. It's a comprehensive, it took a lot of time of research. I'm gonna just give some observations and remarks, and we can, if you want, discuss these observations later. So I would like to start by stressing on the importance of the issue, of our issue, the issue of the report. It's the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. And in fact, this question remains at the heart of the Lebanese politics, at the Palestinian politics, but also at the regional politics. And this is not the case of the other refugees in other host countries. And the question is why? What makes the Palestinian presence in Lebanon that important? And this is what I'm going to try to answer this question. I won't go to all the history of the Lebanese-Palestinian relations. In the report, we went back to the beginning. We talked about the whole period of the civil war, of the post-war years. But here I prefer to focus more on the more recent situation. And in fact, recently what allowed the Palestinian present question to re-emerge on the Lebanese political scene is that this present became an instrument of the regional tug of war. And in fact, this present mainly was reflected to this re-emergence, I would say, with the issue of the weapons, with the adoption of the 1559 in 2004. And then the Lebanese leader agreed international dialogue to deal with the Palestinian arsenal. And so the agreement was to dismantle the military bases run outside the camps, which are run by pro-Syrian factions, and to reorganize the weapons inside the camps. I would say that the reorganization of the weapons inside the camp is still very, not very clear, and this needs to be more to be worked on because no one really knows. We tried to give an answer, but there's no clear answer to what is reorganizing the camp inside the arms inside the camps. So despite this, at least apparent agreement to deal with the Lebanese issues, in fact, the Lebanese and the Palestinian scenes both stayed very divided on this issue. And this is how it became, in fact, what we call an instrument of the regional tug of war. For members of the March 14, they were backed by the West. The weapon issue is one dimension of the struggle with Damascus. For them, disarming the pro-Syrian faction would be another mean to restrain Syria's influence over Lebanon. It would also constitute a precedent for disarming also Hezbollah, because the 1559 talk about disarming all parties. For Hezbollah and its allies, in fact, they feared that beginning of disarming the Palestinians would be a prelude to a broader implementation of the 1559 resolution. On the Palestinian side, it's okay. On the Palestinian side, the disarmament and the whole reorganization issue of the arms had important advantages for the PLO from one side and disadvantages for what we call the Tahaluf factions, the Hamas, Popular Front, General Command, Fatah al-Intifada, and the other pro-Syrian factions. First, for the PLO, disarming these groups was an advantage because, first of all, their military potential was seriously damaged. Second, because the PLO distanced itself from the armed struggle since it signed the Oslo Accord. And third, because these factions challenged the authority of the PLO. They challenged its authority during the war, after the war, and still are right now. So, on the other side, the factions of the Tahaluf, they saw their military capacity as a challenge to the PLO, first of all. They also could present themselves as the defender of the refugees' right, mainly the right of return. Plus, it is a mean to exert pressure on a regional level, mainly for Syria, which could serve as a pressure on its Lebanese adversaries, but also on the more regional level with Israel. So effectively, and because of these divisions, nothing really has been done regarding the weapons. And still, we still talk, and again, when the Lebanese leader met lately, they talk about this issue, but nothing is really being done. But the important thing is that the whole situation regave the Palestinian presence an importance and a priority. And before, it's been ignored like for 15 years. And then the Palestinian issue re-emerged on the political scene. And this why, in fact, the leaders were aware that they couldn't deal only with the weapon issue, that the whole Lebanese-Palestinian relations need to be addressed and need to be revised because of the whole history of these relations during the war, but also after the war. And so in our report, what we tried to do is to show is that as of 2005, 2006, there was a shift in the Lebanese politics regarding the Palestinian presence. First, the PLO office was reopened after 15 years, in fact, of interruption. Second, the Lebanese government created the LPDC, the Lebanese Palestinian Dialogue Committee. And this move, the creation of the LPDC, in itself is an important change. In fact, for the first time, I would say that we have a Lebanese body, governmental body, that is charged of dealing with the Palestinian issue. And this is why, at least with the creation of the committee, the Palestinian presence in Lebanon cannot be ignored anymore like it has been before during the 15 years after the war. And the mandate of the LPDC was for sure to find ways to deal with the weapons, but I think its more important mandate was to deal with the whole Palestinian situation, the living conditions, the political relation. And during our field work, we did a lot of interviews, and most of the Palestinians would agree that there is a change, that the LPDC is doing concrete steps to improve the situation of the Palestinians in Lebanon. they all agree that it plays a major role a mediation role between the Palestinian and the refugees. And before, for example, it is a mediator between the Lebanese army, for example, and the Palestinian. In Nahr al-Barid, it facilitated the access of the people to the camps. But in fact, also what we show in our report, that the progress has been very slow. And the mandate of the LPDC, which is to really improve the situation of the Palestinian, is not being really accomplished. The LPDC I think its work has been hampered by the overall political situation in Lebanon, by the political divisions on the Lebanese scene, but also on the Palestinian scene. And because also of what happened in Nahr al-Barid and other emergency situations, the LPDC find itself dealing with emergency situations, with the crisis situation, more than really putting the stones for a new relations and new better situation for the Palestinians. And I think until now, the more crucial issues regarding the status of the Palestinian and Lebanon, regarding the rights, the whole, how really to involve more the Palestinian in the Lebanese politics haven't been addressed. And this is one of the things that really need to be addressed by the LPDC. Another issue that really hampered the initiative to address the whole Palestinian situation is the Lebanese politics complexity. And here I would talk about, like all the people that we've met would talk about the Tawteen. I know that the Tawteen is the permanent settlement and the fear of the Tawteen. I know that the LPDC have been doing lots of effort to replace this term and to use the term right of return, and maybe they wouldn't be very happy to hear it again today, but I think we have to really face the fact that the fear of Tawteen is still one of the main factors that regulates the relations between Lebanese leaders and the Palestinian refugees. And in fact, several Lebanese officials admitted, and this is, I think, also is a major change, that Lebanon's policy until now was guided by the idea to maintain the Palestinian in a precarious situation, to diminish any prospect of their permanent settlement. And they also would say that the economic and the security measures are aiming to this purpose too. And this is important because they're admitting at least the problem. I'm not sure that now we can just consider that the Tawteen is behind us. It's still in the political discourse. It is all the time being used. And even now, after the creation of the LPDC, and despite all its effort, it's still being one of the main factors in the Lebanese politics. And this is what makes now that the whole situation of the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon is regulated by a patchwork of laws and de facto measures that really restrict their rights. And the LPDC and the Lebanese government couldn't address this issue. The LPDC's mean was to address these measures, but not really the regulation because of the political instability, because of how the different leaders could use the issue of the Tawteen, especially that we're approaching with the elections. So the LPDC would tell you that we prefer to wait until the election are finished, and then we will start more proactive measures. So it's, I think there's a contradiction or something very paradoxal, I would say, that we all, Lebanese and Palestinian, claim the rejection of the Tawteen, and it became one of the national constant, but there's no clear definition of Tawteen. And all the people that we've met, when you ask them what is the Tawteen, you would receive very different answers. Some for them is the permanent settlement. For others, it's the citizenship. Other leaders would tell you that it's related to the right to vote. So in one of our recommendations, the idea was to give a clear definition of the tawteen, and for this issue not to be used anymore to restrict the right of the Palestinian or to continue in this the way of dealing with the Palestinians. But I think there's also a major change, and we have to admit it, even regarding this tawteen issue. And there is a major change with the political discourse. I would give the example of the Lebanese forces or the Kata'ib. It was very surprising to hear them admitting that we need to deal in a better way with the Palestinian presence in Lebanon. We need to improve the living conditions. We need to grant them their rights. And all the leaders, all the different leaders, would also admit that the policy that have been conducted until now had very, very dangerous implication for Lebanon and for the Palestinians. And this is very, very important, but it's not moving forward. We're still, we can hear this discourse, but no major change, mainly regarding legislation and regarding the general measures related to the Palestinian situation have changed. Or at least there is a minimal change, but not really I would say mainly the legislations that need to be changed have not been addressed yet. No legislation have been submitted to the parliament, I think. So this is in general the Lebanese Palestinian situation, but one other problem that face and that also contribute to the situation is the internal Palestinian situation, Palestinian divisions between the factions. And here also we come to an issue that makes this presence of such an importance, because the Palestinian camps in Lebanon are in fact a microcosm of the broader Palestinian arena. So in fact in 1970s and in the beginning of the 80s, Fatah was the main and most powerful Palestinian faction in Lebanon. But it has been weakened during the war and after the war. It has been even restricted from some camps under the Syrian domination. After the Syrian withdrawal from Lebanon, Fatah was able to regain some of its influence. And then we had the scenario, the same in Lebanon became similar as what's happening in the Palestinian territories, in a way. We had the same polarization, the same divisions, and the same struggle for power between the factions in general, the PLO and the Tahaluf, but mainly between Fatah and Hamas. In fact, the PLO considers that it is the sole and legitimate representative of the Palestinians in general, and this has to be reflected in Lebanon. For the Tahaluf faction, they see that there's a major change that happened in the balance of power between the faction and in the broader on the broader Palestinian national scene. And for them, these changes has to be reflected in the Lebanese politics. And here again was the problem for the Lebanese state to deal with whom to deal. And for the LPDC, for example, this was a major problem because the Palestinian factions weren't able they submitted, they couldn't submit one unified demand. They couldn't form a joint committee. And after all, the LPDC was what Nadim calls it, the Palestinian Lebanese monologue committee. There wasn't a counterpart for a Palestinian counterpart for the LPDC. In fact, the divisions between the Palestinian factions had really serious consequences for the refugees. First, it deprived them from the coherent and effective political representations. And all attempts have failed until now. Even I would say that there is a minimum of coordination and communication, better than what's happening in the Palestinian territories. But for example, all the leaders agreed on what they called the political command. But this agreement was suspended because of what's happening in Gaza after the Hayy al-Shuja'iyya events in 2008. There were even more serious effects, I would say. One of it is, in fact, what happened in Nahr al-Barid. Indirectly, I think, the divisions between the Palestinian factions affected the situation and was a cause, an indirect cause of what happened, because the Palestinian factions weren't able to agree on a common approach to how to deal with Fatah al-Islam from the beginning, before the crisis erupted, and when the crisis erupted. And this is why I think what led the intervention led to the intervention of the Lebanese army and the whole consequences of the Nahr al-Barid conflict, with the destruction of the old camp, the displacement of more than 30,000 people, and all the consequences that we're still witnessing till our day. So these divisions were really very harmful, I would say, and one could feel it even in a daily management of the camps, in the working of the popular committees, for example, with the UNRWA, so it's affecting the situation in the camps. Another main problem related to the Palestinian factions is internal problems to some factions, mainly the PLO and Fatah, I would say. I wouldn't go into all the details related to the whole problems of the PLO, the need to reform it and everything. I know this is being dealt on a even higher level, but the internal problems of the PLO, and I think there's the PLO for many Palestinians have been discredited, is affecting the organization. It's affecting also the efficiency and credibility of the organization in Lebanon, at least for part of the Palestinian, I would say. The other main problems is growing divisions or growing problems within Fatah itself. And this also have a major impact on the situation in the camp. In fact, within Fatah, we have first local leaders who reject central authority. Some of them seek to exercise domination on specific camps or even specific area within the camps. And there's a competition between not only Hamas and Fatah or Tahaluf and PLO, but sometimes also between the same leaders within Fatah. And at one point, I think the divisions were too deep that we could talk about two currents within Fatah and Lebanon. There is initiative to reshuffle the whole ranks of the movement and to centralize more the decisions. But I think the process proved to be very difficult. First, because there are leaders who've been established in Lebanon since the 70s. So they have really very wide connections. They know very well the situation, and they can impose their domination over certain areas. So I think the problems within Fatah affected also the situation in the camps, and this led to main problems. Either regarding sometimes the organization of the armed struggle or the whole security situation in the camps. The most important, I think, is there is a feeling within the Palestinian refugee that they are deprived of a legitimate and recognized and strong enough leadership, a leadership that is capable of accomplishing achievement for them, that is really fighting for their rights in Lebanon or for improving their situation. The factions are taken by their power struggle, and we have, again, the status quo as being the only solution. now I'll come, in fact, to the final point that I will talk today, is the jihadism in the camps. And here I'd like also to stress that it is very complicated, and I won't go into all the details related to jihadism. But I want to say that, of course, the rise of jihadism is not specific to the camps. And sometimes in the media, the camps are being associated to terrorism and jihadism. And I think that the whole region witnessed a rise of such a phenomenon. And in Lebanon in general, we have, in some areas, the rise of jihadi groups. But there are some converging factors specific to the camps, and that these factors, if we put it anywhere else, would also lead to the rise of the jihadism in the context today. I would give just few of these factors. In fact, first we have the camp's seclusion and isolation from the rest of the countries. And then the deteriorating living condition and the discrimination of the Lebanese state against the Palestinian. And this discrimination is usually used by jihadi groups for mobilization. It is used as to associate the discrimination with the fact that Palestinians are Sunni or are Muslim, so it's serving kind of the jihadi groups. Then the collapse of the peace process also affected the leadership in general in the camps, and it intensified the process. The major important thing also is the camp's institutional security and political vacuum. In fact, there is a crisis of institution in the camps, whether we're talking about social institutions, whether we're talking about political institutions, security institutions. And in fact, jihadi groups, they present themselves as an alternative to this, the leadership, the PLO, for example. They're trying to replace the vacuum that is existing in the camps. They accuse, for example, the PLO of capitulation for Israel and renouncing to the right of return. And the division between the factions also served the jihadi groups because, for example, what happened in Gaza between Fatah and Hamas also served the jihadi groups because there is a general frustration, plus there is a discredit of the whole Palestinian faction, the other ones. These factors has to be added also and combined to the weakness of the Lebanese state. And this is also what allow the rise of jihadi groups in general in some areas in Lebanon and in the camps. It has to be also combined to the political divisions on the Lebanese scene. And more important, the weakness of the security institutions in Lebanon in general. So all these factors combined are kind of allowing this rise of jihad, which is, I would say also that it is a phenomenon that usually exaggerated. And for example, when nobody would have heard about Nahr al-Barid before, but when the crisis erupted and we had Fatah al-Islam, the whole international and Lebanese and Arab media was talking about Nahr al-Barid. So now Nahr al-Barid is associated to terrorism, whereas before it had very good relation with its all in the surrounding area with the Lebanese and with in Akkar and in Tripoli. So, and I think it's also affecting the image of the Palestinian camps in general. There's one remark that I would, it's mainly a distinction between some groups, the Usbat al-Ansar, for example, and Fatah al-Islam. And I think here we have to be very careful, and we shouldn't associate some groups that are already exist in the camps and have deep roots in the camp with Fatah al-Islam, for example. For sure, Usbat al-Ansar recruit fighters for the international jihad. They admitted, people who have close ties with it admitted. They recruited people to fight in Iraq, and they also claim it with no problem. But what's sure that for these groups, Asbat al-Ansar, for example, in Ain al-Halwa, they have all the interest to maintain the statu quo in the camps. So for sure, they want to avoid any confrontation with the Lebanese state. And this is very different from what Fatah al-Islam did. So Asbat al-Ansar have now relations with the Lebanese state, it has relation with the other faction, and it's contributing in general to the security of the camp. And I think there is a major change even after Fatah al-Islam and what happened in Nahr al-Barid, because all the factions, including the Islamist one now, want to prevent any camp what happened in Nahr al-Barid. I just want to close with a last remark, which is mainly there is a problem and there is a long relation of mistrust between the Lebanese and Lebanese state and the refugees. There is a deep feeling of insecurity in the camp. There is a deep feeling of fear and of precariousness and threat. And of course, the conflict of Nahr al-Barid revived these fears. In the report, we described the situation as follows. Many factors combine. In fact, lack of hope, absence of viable economic horizon, social marginalization and exclusion, frustration and anger toward the states, political divisions, plus weapon and political economy. I think all these factors combined are potential for instability and violence, and this is what mainly explain the title of our report. And these are the factors that, as I said before, if you put them in any other area, would give the same result. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sahar, and thank you very much for the Issam Faris Institute for organizing this meeting, which I think is very, very important as a public forum for discussing such issues and it's one of the unique institutions in Lebanon where something like this can happen without much politicization and in a sort of objective manner. And it gives us all a chance to have a break from talking about the elections as well. I personally think that the ICG report is a very important landmark in dealing with the refugee issue in Lebanon because of the comprehensiveness of its approach and because it deals with it from different angles. I mean, you did not, one of the angles which you did not present in your summary was that you also deal with UNRWA, you deal with all the much of the literature so far on Palestinians in Lebanon tend to be more of a rights-based advocacy type, which there is a narrative that has evolved in the last 20 years, let's say, or mainly 15 years, which is not useful in solving any problems. So we are in a period where there is a lot of change, and this change is slow, and this change is happening on the policy level quicker than on the NGO level and on in the international community perception and Lebanese perception and Palestinian perception. So I think one of the priorities is to catch up with the change in the way we present the problem. I'm going to do a bit the opposite of what Sahar did. Sahar presented all the complex issues. I'm going to try and simplify them and I'm not going to talk for a long time, just to allow for discussion. There are basic issues on which there is consensus. For example, there is consensus that what the situation of the camps in the last 30 years in Lebanon was not satisfactory. It was not satisfactory for the Lebanese, not satisfactory for the Palestinians, and not satisfactory for the international community, nor the PLO, nor the regional actors. And that there is an accumulation of neglect, of errors, there's a tumultuous past, which, if you like, can be summarized in an old order that existed in the camps, which resulted in a lot of hardship for everybody concerned, and which ultimately erupted in the crisis in Nahr al-Bared, in the war of Nahr al-Bared, which caused even more hardship and was a kind of a wake-up call for dealing with the Palestinian issue. So the old order has to change, and this has been, in a sense, what the Lebanese government has proposed. I mean, this is the new policy of the government and the new policy of the PLO and of the Palestinian Authority. The process started with a meeting on the 5th of October 2005 between President Abu Mazen and Prime Minister Senora. So the process in a way started 2 years at least before the Nahr al-Bared crisis. So this old order has a lot of facets. It definitely has a security facet and a governance facet, but it also has a multidimensional human rights and economic and social. It has to be dealt with in a comprehensive manner by the Lebanese government and by the international community and by the Palestinian factions or the Palestinians. I think there is too much emphasis on Palestinian factions in talking about the Palestinian camps, and too little emphasis on the Palestinian civilians themselves, on civil society and all that. And I will mention this in my comment on the conclusions of the report on this. So what you have is a new order that's being proposed, a new order to address all these issues with a lot of promises. The two orders came to a head in the Nahr al-Bared war. The Nahr al-Bared war happened at a time when it should have been expected because things were building up, but it was a surprise when it happened, and it was, if you like, a major war in terms of Lebanese history, even, because it was the first time the Lebanese army ever fights a war of that kind. And if I compare the casualties on the Lebanese side to say the British army in Iraq, the Lebanese army lost 180 soldiers in 3 months, whereas the British army lost 150 soldiers in 5 years in a major endeavor like the occupation of Iraq. And in a sense also the impact was larger on the smaller community because a lot of these soldiers came from the surrounding villages and the surrounding area of Nahr al-Bared. So the impact on Lebanese-Palestinian relations at the time was very serious, and the stakes were represented by the possibility, I mean the high stakes were represented by the possibility of the Nahr al-Bared war erupting, spreading all over the 12 camps in Lebanon, and this would have been a disaster if it had been perceived as a Lebanese versus Palestinian war, rather than as a Lebanese-Palestinian on one side versus Fatah al-Islam war. So it, in a sense, it was a success on the part of everybody involved to manage to keep that distinction and not make it erupt into a Lebanese-Palestinian war again. So, in a nutshell, the new order has made promises. And the promises are on the security side as well as on the legal and social and economic sides. And the Palestinian civilians in the camp, by and large, responded to these promises and had some faith in the promises, in the new order, and collaborated with it. If the Palestinian civilians had not evacuated the camp, if it had been perceived as a Lebanese-Palestinian war, it would have been much more of a disaster, and it may not have been able to be fought. I mean, the army would not have been able to fight Fatah al-Islam if there were 30,000 civilians staying in the camp. This is very clear on the side. So the Palestinian-Lebanese collaboration and the new order that's trying to establish itself has, in a sense, succeeded in a preliminary way. And now we are at a very critical point because the new order promised the reconstruction of the camp. It promised a rule of law, human rights, promised that the government promised that the camp will be a model for Palestinian-Lebanese relations that would spread in other camps. And if the new order does not deliver at this stage, if the reconstruction fails, if the security measures do not improve, if the situation of the camp does not ameliorate itself I think in a very short period of time, then we will find that the skepticism about the new order may backfire, and a Palestinian refugee who believed in what was promised will probably find himself thinking that the old order was unsatisfactory but was better, because we at least we had our houses, we had our property, and we had a few bearded people to contend with, and we had a few militias to contend with, but now they find themselves in a destitute situation, surrounded with very harsh measures from the army. The reconstruction is not starting on time. And the relief efforts are not sufficient. So I think this is the main message that the ICG report also portrays, that if you want to summarize it in a nutshell, that there was an old situation that lasted 30 years or maybe 60 years, and it has come to a head. If it is not dealt with, it will backfire and explode. And that, I think, is the reason for the alarmist title, which you in policy circles you need to be pushy on that. Now, the ICG report also puts forward some recommendations, and I have one comment about the recommendations, which is which I've mentioned before, which is the emphasis on well, basically the emphasis on getting the factions to agree and getting the factions to govern the camps again and have it make a deal with the government. I think for the refugees this may be a bad option, because the the factional rule of the camps is part of the problem. It's not part of the solution. I think the aspiration should be to have the rule of law and to have the factions represent themselves politically rather than be involved in the security aspects of the camps. Now, another thing which I'd like to say is that the new order or the new policy of the government, which is by and large also supported by the international community, faces many internal challenges and faces a lot of hurdles and developments on the ground in the last 3 years, included 2 wars, 12 assassinations, the Gaza war, lots of regional developments also affected the situation. But in a sense, these challenges are real challenges within the Lebanese political system and within the Palestinian internal debate. And Lebanon, in a sense, is also unique because the Palestinian society in Lebanon is very representative of the broad political divisions within the Palestinian society at large. This broad representation does not exist even in Palestine because the refugees that are outside and the factions of the refugees that have been outside all the time are not represented. It certainly does not exist in Jordan or in Syria, and in the diaspora also they are not. The very new development of Palestinian diaspora politics from Toronto to Boston is also not as comprehensive as it is in Lebanon. So in a sense, the challenges one faces on the Palestinian side to sell the ideas of a new policy and a new order are as complex as Palestinian politics are at large. They include issues such as Tawteen, the peace process, reform of the PLO. It's a microcosm of all the problems that one faces in resolving any Palestinian problem, and it's probably the place where you can address it best because everybody is present. And the way it has been dealt with during the Gaza war and during the Nahr al-Barid war, the way both sides have managed to maintain internal peace within the camps is very encouraging. And could be a precedent for the future in that Lebanon would be spared, or the refugees in Lebanon at least will be spared the more suffering because of these internal divisions now on the Lebanese side. I think it is probably too generous to attribute to the Lebanese state any coherent policy before 2005. One has to remember that from 1969, the Palestinian, with the rise of the PLO in Lebanon, with the Jordan war, with Lebanon becoming the center of Palestinian activity, the beginning of the Lebanese state was less powerful than the PLO in a sense, and had no influence in the camps. And from then till the end of the civil war, the Lebanese state was almost non-existent for its own citizen, and it is difficult to say that the Lebanese state, as a state, had a coherent policy vis-à-vis the Palestinian issue. And also in the last 15 years, which you mention as being the Palestinian question being marginalized, the last 15 years started with an attempt to deal with the Palestinian issue, even though it was very low on the priority of any Lebanese government, because in 1990 we emerged from a civil war with 500,000 Lebanese displaced, with reconstruction, with the economy needing revival with the dollar at £3,000. So at that time, the Lebanese state did not have as a priority to deal with it, and the attempt to organize a dialogue was stopped by the emergence of the peace process. It was difficult to deal with internal Palestinian issues on the refugees when they were being at the same time discussed in the peace process. So while the other facet of being too generous in attributing a coherent policy to the Lebanese state, it's also unfair to attribute the blame to the Lebanese state in a sense, because attributing a blame means that there was a coherent policy on the issue. And I think that the fact that there was no coherent policy is more of a problem than having a strategy that caused the problems. I will end with just one appeal to a lot of my friends who are in the room, both Lebanese international scholars and Palestinians, that there is a need for catching up with the new situation on the ground. There is a need for a new type of research based on finding solutions to problems rather than flogging a dead horse again with advocacy issues. I think Lebanese and Palestinian societies are very similar. The divisions are similar. They are divided. The Palestinians themselves are divided into 8th of March and 14th of March in a way. And some of the research shows that the employment patterns, the socioeconomic patterns, the immigration patterns are very similar to the host country environment. And there are lots of myths that are circulating which are not useful for a stance where you want to solve the problem, because the challenges, the political challenges, are made worse by the myths that are circulated. There are a few of these myths repeated in the report, of course attributed to people who talked about them. So I will stop here to allow time for questions. And to Sahar. Thank you.
I just answer a few of the remarks that Nadim did. First of all, regarding the factions, and I agree, the factions were part of the problem. But in fact, in our recommendation, when you talk about the rule of law, when you talk about security, and you're not credible enough when we don't have a strong central state, when you don't have a state that is able to secure its own people. So I don't see really, our recommendations are very targeting policymakers and policy in general. I don't see it very credible to go and see that the Lebanese, to say that the Lebanese state has to secure the order and law in the camps, where it's incapable of doing it in general. So we were talking mainly about a transition kind of phase where there's a more coordination and a different approach between the Lebanese authorities and the factions. So as for the general policy of the Lebanese state after the war, I wouldn't go, and I agree with you, there wasn't really a state during the war, but after the war, for sure, there wasn't a coherent policy regarding the Palestinian, but there were some, factors that were guided by at least some decisions, I would say. The Lebanese politicians chose either not to deal with the Palestinian issue at all, maybe because of the whole history of the war and because, you know, the relations were really damaged at a point that most of the politicians chose not to deal with the Palestinian relations. Even the initiative of the 1991 wasn't really serious. You know, they didn't even meet more than once, I think. So we can't really talk about an initiative when you have a committee that was constituted and only met once and then never get back to the Palestinian delegation for follow-up. But I think, and this, if you go on the website, there's something on the discussion of the parliament for the right of property. And this was, for me, was really very tellingful, because you would see the discussion in the parliament, how the politician at that time, it was in 2001, how they were proceeding. And it was mainly this obsession of the fear of Tawtin. And they all voted for the restriction of the right of property to the Palestinians, because some because they are afraid of the Tawtin, other because they don't want to be accused of Tawtin, and so on. So we didn't really talk about a coherent politics, but I think there are some markers in this politic that led to the situation that we're facing, that we had to face in 2005. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We'll be taking questions now. There's a microphone going around, so please wait for it before you speak. And please introduce yourselves before you ask questions, and please be brief so that everyone has a chance to talk.
My name is Leila Zakharia. I'm with Welfare Association. I'm one of your friends, Mr. Shehadi. I think a lot of information, thank you for your talk, a lot of information was given. Maybe, all the pieces are there, I think, but some of them are missing. I've read both of the report when it appeared, and of course the briefing paper that recently appeared, which you authored, Nadim. So it's sort of, I think what is lacking in this, maybe because there is no time, but I think it's good to remind ourselves, we're talking about a regional context also, the Arab-Israeli conflict, and that the instability in the region is not, the instability is not just in the Palestinian camps, it's in Lebanon, and it's everywhere in this region. We don't need to go into this, but I think we should put it in that context that this is all interlinked in many ways. And when you start talking about jihadism, obviously this is very linked. And if we only take it from that perspective, we can also take it from another perspective, which we all have raised before, but I still think we should remind ourselves that the peace process, so the so-called peace process, marginalized the refugee issue, and therefore what is happening in Lebanon is but a result also, or is connected one way or the other, also to this very complicated map that we have around us. I just want to pick up on 2 points. The first point, I agree with Nadim that the question of civil society is not very sufficiently addressed, at least when you present it now. I'm not going to say, I read the report when it appeared, so I don't remember exactly the details. And I think that this is a very important question that we need to talk about and to highlight, in the sense that the point to understand also is that we have a civil society that has no ability to affect its own fate at any level, whether as Palestinians in general, as Palestinian citizens without a state and with a problem and so on and so forth. This is a very important issue. And the second one, there are people, these Palestinians who live in Lebanon, and it applies perhaps, are people who can't decide on their fate in Lebanon. They have no recourse. And not just because the factions are divided and don't agree, because there isn't a process of election. They cannot elect representatives, etc., etc. This is a very important point, that we cannot talk about Palestinians here in the abstract as a body, just a community, but they are individuals who are entitled to be citizens and to affect their fate. Therefore, I link that to your, you keep saying advocacy. No, advocacy is a good way to improve the situation of people. We cannot say, advocacy is useless. No, why is it useless? If we are talking about a situation where we have problems in Lebanon about the perception of what role the Palestinians will have in this country as residents in this country, yes, we have to talk about advocacy to explain to people that Palestinians want to retain their identity even if they don't have a state and they can't go back to it, and they want to live in dignity. And that is part of why we have an improvement, a relative improvement from the Lebanese government in its policies. It's actually advocacy reached that because the advocacy that Palestinians have carried out over the last 20 years has embarrassed to a certain the image of Lebanon. And I don't think any Lebanese wants to be constantly reminded about how the situation. So I think we have to look at it in that perspective, and I'm with advocacy, which is respectful, which is there, but people have to advocate their rights, especially when there is nobody. They cannot vote for anything and they don't have representatives. Thank you.
Part of our job is advocacy too, so we publish the report and then we advocate for the recommendations. So I agree, advocacy is very important. And the report wouldn't have any meaning if we don't go to policymakers and tell them about the report and advocate and everything. I agree. In fact, it's as Nadim said, the report that we did is very comprehensive. We tried really to address the Palestinian presence in its all different aspects. I hope we succeeded in this. I didn't talk about every point in the report. We have a part on the popular committees, for example. We have a part on the UNRWA, and so it is in the report, but it would have been really too long to talk about all this. I agree that the regional context, and we placed in the report the whole Palestinian issue in this regional context, the Lebanese one, the Palestinian one, but also the regional. I would say one thing, that one of the criticism that I've heard was that all our recommendations were addressed to either the Lebanese or the Palestinian or the Arabs, and no recommendation to Israel. And I agree, but in fact, we tried to figure what can we recommend in such a report when we're talking about the Palestinian situation in Lebanon. Other than Palestinians should go back to their country, but this is not really the type of recommendation that we do, because we try to find more concrete and feasible recommendation. But I agree, it's the whole Israelo-Arab conflict that is, in fact, we're dealing with when we talk about the refugees.
If I may also just reply a bit to Leila. In fact, what I am doing is advocacy too, because I'm advocating a change in attitude. So that's, and I'm not against advocacy per se. I'm against the rights-based advocacy approach, which is directed at creating a kind of, or perpetuating what you call yourself a victim mentality, and doing analogies with either Alabama in the 1960s or South Africa situation, which is giving too much credit for a Lebanese coherent policy. I think much of it was knee-jerk. They were reactions to small incidents, or some incidents in the 90s, and there wasn't a single person behind a desk in the whole Lebanese government that had the job to think about a Palestinian policy or about the refugees. So it's not a dead horse that's being flogged. It was never alive in a sense to be flogged. And if there has been, I think on the political level, there has been in Lebanon a lot of change in attitudes on many things. A lot of the taboos that have been within Lebanese discourse in the since the civil war have been broken in the last 4 years, and it's up to researchers, NGOs, and people who are precisely people who are doing advocacy to also catch up with this change, catch up with new policies. And it's a longer story than I can say now.
Khalil Isa, I'm political science master's in AUB. I want to ask Mr. Nadim about two things. The first thing is the Tawteen issue. I mean, no, I think you talked about it. I think this is like, if we really want to be objective about it, it's very similar to a constant lie in the political discourse in Lebanon. I mean, if you ask Palestinians, no one wants to, whatever it is, Tawteen, Itwattanu. And for the Lebanese, all the parties actually, at least publicly, and probably even in private circles, would say that they would not accept the Tawteen, whatever it is. But I mean, isn't this like using this term all the time, repeatedly in media and so on? Isn't this like perpetuating a situation by some mysterious kind of discourse that we are really in no situation of knowing what it is? So this means that the status quo will remain and the charge will remain, and the victims become the perpetrators, and even before we think about it. That's first. I mean, I would prefer if maybe, I don't know, I didn't read all the crisis report, but ICG, but I don't know if some work has been done on the Tawteen thing, I mean, itself, the term, how it is used and so on. The second question, it is, I mean, about Mr. Nadim. He said that like he doesn't think that the Lebanese government has any ability or so on to work on, maybe it is a weak state, and it has no actual ability in promoting Lebanese Palestinian security in the camps and so on. But I mean, the fact remains in the end, in the final analysis, that a lot of people that go and, for example, go to several factions like Fatah and Jabha Sha'biya and so on, it's mainly because either they want money, for example, some are on payroll, or for example, it is the only alternative, because I mean there are no good educational job opportunities. I mean, the final analysis, if we see at Syrian, for example, Syrians, they have beautiful camps. And I'm not saying they are beautiful, but I mean any Palestinian who wants, for example, to carry arms and so on, he has his own in the army, Syrian army. They can enroll in the Syrian army and so on. So I mean, I suppose we should ask really how much there is actual responsibility on the Lebanese, because the Palestinians, I mean, the attitude after Beirut, it is the fact that it was a racist attitude. I mean, there was a racist racism against the Palestinians, whether we like it or not. I'm not talking about everybody, but I mean, there was a current that it has been preponderant in the Lebanese political discourse, that everything is caused by the Palestinians and we don't have anything to do with it, and so on. So I mean, I don't know. Thank you.
Okay. Regarding the Tawteen, in fact, I agree. And we're very clear about it. And this is why I said that we don't even have a definition. What is Tawteen? Now, if you ask in this room, you will have different answers. And it's in the name of the Tawteen that the Palestinians are being prevented from their rights. So I don't know. There are some articles that have been written, but as usual, very ideological one. There is a risk, I think. So people really, some believe that there's a risk because of the whole Arab-Israeli conflict, because there's no prospect for return. And it's mainly from this perspective that there's a fear of Tawteen. But what our stand in the report is to say that using the Tawteen to continue on this irregular, abnormal situation is really very dangerous, even for Lebanon, and this proved until now. So I think there's the change, but the Tawteen will be used. It has been used recently. It has been used during the Gaza war even. So it is a lie, but you know the lie you can, how do you entertain? So regarding the factions, in fact, I said that we have we couldn't really recommend that the Lebanese state go into the camps and be in charge of the security in the camps, because for the time being, we think that it's not feasible. And I agree, the factions weren't really the best solution, but we cannot really compare the situation in Syria to what's happening in Lebanon. For sure, we have two different states, two different of government, and for the time being, I think, and even military and political leaders will tell you that we're not able to go and to impose security and law in the camp in a peaceful way. Not only because they don't have the means, but also because of all these, relations, the mistrust, and really that has to be addressed. Plus, you cannot address the security issue without addressing the whole package. I mean, and what we're preaching is a comprehensive approach. And I think security has to be, of course, an important but not the first priority, because it will provoke some reactive reactions and fear again, because, so that's it.
Okay, I hope the next questions will be easier than these. On the Tawteen issue, there are two very clear and very separate issues relating to Tawteen. One of them is, regardless of what Tawteen means, regardless of what happens in the peace process, whether there is right of return, whether there is perpetual war, or the answer is that this has nothing to do with living conditions in the camps, and with civil rights, and with human rights, and with security, it's both the Lebanese and the Palestinians who have to absorb this, and it's been changing in the last 4 or 5 years on both sides. But you do not need to be miserable in a camp to get your political rights. If you get them, you can be a millionaire with a private airplane and a yacht, and you still have whatever rights will come out of an agreement or outside an agreement. There is no so I think that the debate over Tawteen is purely internal political on both sides of the equation, and should be separated from any implementation of the policies or of a new era or a new order in the refugee camps in Lebanon. It's unrelated to it on that. And one example of how Tawteen is used in a completely unrelated way is exactly the debates that you had over the property law. Because the real division over the property law was within Lebanon about foreign investment, about the desirability of foreign investment. It was about whether the government was going to bring in all its Gulf friends. Basically, it was directed against that if you liberalize foreign investment in the country, then the country will be bought by the Gulf sheikhs, and the Lebanese will become the drivers and the butlers. This was the people who were against the property law. And the reason why they brought out the Tawteen issue has nothing to do with the Palestinians. The reason why they brought it out is because of this sentence in the Constitution, where if you can show that something is related to Tawteen, then the whole law becomes unconstitutional. So you have what happened was a real paradox in that the people who promoted this law inserted the clause about the Palestinians in order to get it out of the constitutional discussion, and then very soon afterwards they appealed against that clause with the Constitutional Court in Lebanon. It was in fact more than that. It was Hariri MPs and Hezbollah MPs, the 10, because you need 10 members of parliament to make an appeal against the law, what they call ta'an. At the time when they were both on opposite sides on everything, they came together and proposed and opposed what they had voted for. So it's an example of how Tawteen is used politically in Lebanon to something completely unrelated to the.
They added the term or something that a not recognized state.
Not recognized state, yes.
So it's Tawteen, and so it's focusing on the Palestinian in the Tawteen and as a non-recognized
well,
state. So
there are only 3 non-recognized states. For example, now I think the people of Kosovo cannot buy property in Lebanon because Lebanon has not recognized Kosovo yet. But it is definitely directed against the Palestinians in order to allow for the law not to be blocked on constitutional grounds. And the real debate was about the whole policy of Prime Minister Hariri of bringing in foreign investment, and rather than about so Tawteen was brought in as a tool, and this is the way it is brought in on both Palestinian and Lebanese side as a tool and as an accusation on that. About the factions, I want to mention a report that was commissioned by the LPDC and by a researcher called Sama Abu Sharrar. It's on their website, and it's an informal kind of mood survey rather than public opinion survey of Palestinian camps on many issues. And if you read that report, you will find that Palestinians want to lead a normal life. They especially the young people who are rebelling against their parents, like my children, for example. they don't. And you have statements like, we are 20,000 people in the camp, and there are 200 armed people who give us the whole image amongst the Lebanese, and who in fact oppress the population of the camp. So I think the aspiration of Palestinian civil society is for a better life than to be under the control of the factions. And there has been many discussions about how to involve civil society in the improvement of the popular committees and I think while I think this is something that, I mean, a second Cairo agreement will not solve the problem. This is what I'm trying to say. And about what Mr. Isa said about the racism, of course there was, and it was I mean, the war in the north was a huge blow to community relations, and it caused a lot of tension between Palestinians and Lebanese in the area, and even in other places. And this is something that has to be managed. It's very similar to what the Iraq War caused with immigrant communities in Europe, and so whenever there is a problem like this, you do have tensions that arise that have to be managed, and it has to be done through advocacy, Leila, and awareness raising, and showing a different image than the ones that are used to create fear. I think a lot of the images you have both on the Palestinian side and on the Lebanese side, are designed to create fear rather than to solve problems.
My name is Samir Al-Khouri. I want to focus on one issue, and that is employment, which didn't come up at all in your discourse. It's very easy to blame the regional context about most of the woes of the Palestinians. It's very hard to get them to agree on most things political. But when it comes to humanitarian issues, and specifically to employment, I don't think you'll find two Palestinians in Lebanon who will disagree that the restrictions on employment should be lifted, because they are unjust not only to the Palestinians, but also to the Lebanese. So if your LPDC, instead of being a monologue committee, talked about real issues under the new order, which you just mentioned without fleshing it at all, Nadim, I think you'll find the Palestinians extremely responsive to such an appeal. If you were to talk about changing, lifting the restrictions on employment, you will get a very good response from not only the Palestinian community, but I think a growing number of Lebanese too. I mean, those Palestinians are involved in the Lebanese economy in a big way, but only in the informal economy. And so they're working at low salaries under unacceptable conditions, inhuman conditions, without any rights. To put it bluntly, they are being exploited. And the Lebanese government is turning a blind eye about this, because they know that there is a lot of informal participation by the Palestinians, but they don't do anything about it. And so the law is there, the informal economy is there, the informal participation of Palestinians in the real economy is there, and it goes on like so many things in Lebanon. Nothing is done about it. So I wish the LPDC would talk more about employment and the real issues and the unacceptable conditions in the camps, their inhuman conditions, and start doing something to the real problems of the Palestinians, and not just say they will not agree and bring in one delegation to talk about whatever issues. There are real issues which they all agree upon, and you should be doing something about it. Then there are a lot of rumors about reconstruction in Nahr al-Barid. For some reason, the inaugural stone was placed with a lot of fanfare, but then now nothing's being done to move on with the reconstruction. And there are a lot of rumors flying around that the government is having second thoughts about the reconstruction process. So could you shed some light on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Khouri. I'm not here representing the Lebanese state. In fact, you are more of a representative of the Lebanese state than I am, because you were. So I'm not going to. I'm not replying on behalf of anybody on the Lebanese state on that. But I think the question you raised about employment is a very important one. And it's related to perceptions on the ground. I mean, if the question of employment is something you have to sell to the Lebanese, because you have to you have to pass laws, you have to amend the law in order to pass to change the situation on the ground. If you want to amend the law, there are two ways of amending the law. Either you go through every small detail that harms Palestinians in Lebanon, or you pass a general law about Palestinian status in Lebanon, which will solve all the problems at the same time, all the legal problems at the same time. But I think that if you solve all the legal problems at the same time, the situation on the ground will probably not change much, because what you need is to marry the legal framework with the developments on the ground, rather than the other way around. There are a lot of misconceptions about Palestinian employment in Lebanon, and the new research has shown that the employment patterns are very similar on the Lebanese and Palestinian side, and this has to be. I mean, if you want to alleviate the fears of the Lebanese, if you want to oppose the raising issues like Tawteen and all that, we have to present a more realistic picture than the cut and paste slogans we see in some advocacy, like 72 jobs are closed to the Palestinians, and you know that this is not true on that. Now, on the reconstruction of Nahr al-Bared, it is very slow. I agree, and this was one of my main points. My main points was that Nahr al-Bared is the test case. If the Lebanese state and the international community and UNRWA and the PLO cannot deliver on their promise, then the whole structure will fail. The whole new approach will fail, and you will get back to the old order. This is what the stakes are. So, the challenges to the reconstruction of Nahr al-Bared are also very important. I mean, some legal ones, some institutional ones, some administrative. Even on the international side, there were legal and administrative problems, and they are being dealt with. What needs what would help is, again, in terms of advocacy, is changing the perception and changing the idea that there is a conspiracy not to rebuild and to affirm the seriousness of the project. And I think the laying of the foundation stone was an excellent idea by the government. It precedes the actual beginning of the reconstruction by probably 2 or 3 months, but it was an affirmation that the political will is there, and that the promise is still there. And it was at a time when it was very much needed to boost morale in the camp when things were going really bad on the ground. It's not abnormal for a foundation stone to be laid way ahead of the reconstruction. I mean, the Solidaire laid its foundation stone 1 year before the reconstruction started. It was a symbolic measure, gesture to show the launch of the project and the seriousness of the project in that case. I mean, employment is really a very important aspect of the legal changes. I think it is the single most important one. And there's no time to go on. It is still on the agenda. Yeah. Well, nothing's been done on which. It's not my agenda. Well, it's the government, it's the Lebanese government's agenda, which is, which is represented in Prime Minister Signora's speeches, in Ambassador Makawi's speeches, in the government decrees and all that. And it is to deal with all the, it's 4 points, which is to deal with the outstanding social, economic, and legal issues relating to Palestinian refugees in view of improving the conditions. And then there's the arms inside the camp and outside the camps, where there is distinction made on that. There's also the question of PLO representation in Lebanon, and this has been achieved on the ground. From the beginning, I think the policy has been that of that there should not be a trade-off on rights issues. So when you're talking about property, the property law or the employment law or association law, there should not be. It should not be conditional on anything related to the security aspects, because rights are not to be traded. They're not. They are there. They are an absolute right, if you like. So there is a refusal to connect the two on the government side, and I think they have been dealing with most of these issues within the constraints of not having a parliament, not having a functioning government, and having now having the electoral period which is not a time to put forward any new laws. What is being done is preparing the ground and preparing all the files, and I think you are contributing a lot to this, Ambassador, to preparing the ground for passing new laws when the new parliament comes into place and the new government comes into place.
We're going to take 3 more questions, which the speakers will respond to all together.
My name is Rosemary Sayegh, and I'm an anthropologist, independent, unemployed. And I wanted to ask Sahar why she begins her presentation with the issue of arms and uses the word arsenal for the camps. And it links with a report the ICC sent out about a month and a half ago, I think, and the first paragraph had this phrase about the camps being heavily armed. And I want to know if you know more than people here know about what kind of arms and how many arms there are in the camps, which gives you and them the authority to speak in this way. And I'd just like to comment on that briefly by saying in 1982, when there was the Sabra Shatila massacre, I think there were about 12 young men in Shatila camp who had guns and who could defend the camp against the attackers. And in 1985, when the Amal militia attacked, they had practically, I think, almost no trained fighters, just a handful, and they had young men who maybe as ashbal carried guns, and they had practically no arms. They had to more or less make their own. So if this is the case, and if the Battle of the Camps was settled, I think under Premier Hoss, Prime Minister Hoss, with the removal of all heavy and medium weapons from the camps, that was the basis of the end of the battle, then where have all the weapons come that now authorize you to say that the camps are heavily armed and an arsenal? And do you really know that that's the case?
Okay. Sorry.
2 more.
Okay.
I based my name is Dane Leach, and I'm a student here at AUB. I based my question on something that Assad Abu Khalil recently said about the Gaza conflict at the end of 2008, which was that at the end of the conflict, the New York Times juxtaposed Israeli soldiers mourning their losses as well as Hamas soldiers mourning their losses on the other side. And Mr. Abu Khalil criticized it on the basis that somehow this established some sort of level of equality, as if these were two equally professional forces fighting against each other. And on the vein of that post, in similar such ideas voiced, I do have some critique of your use of the word war for what happened in Al Bared. I think it gives a sense that somehow the conflict was between two highly trained armies that have received funds equally from America and everywhere else, as opposed to a professional army going against one that is not an army or professional. Thank you.
The issue of racism was raised before, but I think the main issue is not racism between the Lebanese community being racist against the Palestinian community, but more the Lebanese law being racist against Palestinians. So how do you want a Lebanese law which is racist to be applied in the camps? And how can you apply this law with very racist institutions? I mean, the army showed what happened in Nahr al-Bared. There were many things that the army practiced which show that the Lebanese institutions are not really well equipped to deal with such sensitive cases.
First I started with the whole weapon issue because I started by saying that the whole, what make the shift in the Lebanese-Palestinian relation now started with the weapon issue. In fact, whether we like it or not, started with the 1559. Before, nobody really thought about dealing with the Palestinian issue. And I thought that it started with the arm issue, but then went to the all other issue because for sure they cannot deal with only the all weapon issues. In fact, regarding the whole weapons, we've conducted interviews with the Lebanese army, with Palestinian factions, with the people, and so it's a very field-based research that we did. I don't have specific info regarding the arms, but if you, the Lebanese army would tell you, for example, that, and this is contradicted by the Palestinian, and we tried to show this in our report, that the Palestinian weapons haven't been delivered in the camps, haven't been delivered, and they are still in the camps. I'm telling you what the military, the official military would say. The Palestinians would tell you that the factions delivered their arms. There are weapons in the camp. How many? What kind? And I for sure I don't have any info. Even I'm not really an expert in the whole weapon issue. But what makes us talk about weapons in the camp is based on these interviews, in fact, and on some facts that happened that showed that there are at least weapons. I'm not talking about specific type, but there are weapons in the. For example, the people would tell you that during the conflict of Nahr al-Bared, there are some weapons that were already in the camps that have been used. So this is how we based, in fact, our.
Surely those were Islam weapons. I mean, it's not known for sure that they were not Islam weapons.
Yeah, I agree, but
how did they get them?
But we asked, how did they get them into the camp?
I don't know. I'll let Nadim answer the In fact, I think first we have to start with the law. You don't need to. we have to be aware that the institutions has to be changed. And this is, you cannot change people, but when you change the law and you start by implementing new laws, not racist ones, I think it will come. But you cannot say that how do you want racist people to implement racist rules? So where do you start, in fact? I think we need to start from the institutions, from a clear definition of the status of the Palestinians in Lebanon. We agree on the status, it's their political status, their rights, and the whole. And then I think it's a culture, but you have racism between Lebanese themselves, you have racism everywhere. So this shouldn't be preventing of really having laws that define and restrict the behavior of people who are implementing them.
Okay. Sorry. Very quickly on the issue of what is behind Lebanese policy, which the date of October 2005 is not a coincidence, because in the last year before this policy was put forward, there were 4 important events that led to it. One that is very much forgotten is the death of Yasser Arafat. The death of Yasser Arafat really changed the scene on the Palestinian side, and the repercussions of it are still with us. On the Lebanese scene, it also created a crisis within Fatah, created a crisis of the balance of power within Fatah and the factions, and there was, so it was an important fact. The second is, of course, 1559, which was also from 2004, which does not give the Lebanese government the choice to ignore the issue anymore, because it's a UN resolution that is addressed to the Lebanese state that has to be implemented. Then you have Syrian withdrawal was also an important factor, because it created a vacuum a security vacuum in the camps, because the camps were largely controlled by the Syrians when they were here. And another fourth, and which I think is important, is an important one, is that there was a change in perceptions in the country, and there was an atmosphere where all taboos were being discussed and broken, and people were in the street, whatever the weather was, and on TV and in the radios and in the press. There was I think the real discussion about the civil war in Lebanon started in 2005 rather than during the 90s. It was a taboo subject. So these are arms is one of the issues, and it is a matter of perception as much as a matter of reality. And the war in Nahr al-Bared certainly reinforced the perception that the arms are present in the camps, and that because the Fatah al-Islam were better armed and had more sophisticated weapons and were better trained than the Lebanese army during the war, I would say, because this leads to the other question, which I assume you're quoting my friend Asad Abu Khalil. I'm trying to find something to say against him, because last time I did, he quoted me on his website and I became very famous on this. But I think the analogy here does not stand. You cannot compare what the Israeli army did in Gaza with what the Lebanese army did in Nahr al-Bared, because if you are, well, in a sense, you're saying that you cannot call it that it was not called a war. I think it was a war for the Lebanese army. It was certainly a major battle, and it was between with a very organized group, with a very well armed group, which had external support, whatever that was. It's a different subject on that, and. So I don't think you can make the analogy with with Gaza because the Palestinians and the Lebanese, both sides of the Palestinians and both sides of the Lebanese confronted, came together to fight Fatah al-Islam in that sense. So that's where the analogy does not hold. Now, Lebanese law, all laws are discriminatory in a sense. Otherwise, they would. Some laws discriminate against people who drive badly. Some laws are on the Lebanese. Lebanese property law is, I think, the only racist one in reality, because it deliberately targets Palestinian property or the Palestinian population on that. Lebanese labor law is not discriminatory in that sense, because Lebanese labor law is based on a 1960s law which does not really mention 72 jobs. It divides the whole labor market into 72 jobs, into 72 categories, and it was a la mode in the 1960s, where it was when Lebanon or President Shehadi was aspiring to create a planned economy, and where a Minister of Labor would be able to issue a decree every year saying that we need so much more of this category, so much less, we have too many plumbers, we need more carpenters, we need less doctors, more dentists, etc. This was, which is practiced in a lot of countries as well. The labor law facilitates according to the requirements of the labor market. This is the original aim, and it has never been applied. The Lebanese state never became the planned economy that has control over the statistics of the labor market. And if you want to disregard the Civil War period and the initial period when the Lebanese state was waking up from the Civil War and paying attention, very early on in the 1990s, in 93 and 95, I think, there were specific amendments to the law that targeted the Palestinians, but in a positive way. For example, I think 1995, they said that any Palestinian who was born in Lebanon is not subject to the restrictions other than the professional, the ones that are related to guilds, because the Lebanese government cannot interfere with the guilds. They're very independent. So in 2009, this makes it that this makes anyone under the age of 61 who was born in Lebanon not subject to many of those restrictions. And in fact, the law is not really applied on the ground. So what is required is to marry the legal aspects with what is happening on the ground. If I want to really upset or provoke people about this, I would say that if tomorrow the labor law is amended, the situation on the ground will not change much, because those who are working will continue working, but it will just be legal. It will not be illegal anymore. And because the law is not applied, in the sense that there's no labor police going around shutting down enterprises and clinics and all that exist already, then what will happen is that they'll make the transition from the informal sector, as Ambassador Khouri calls them, to a legalized one. But the impact on the ground needs a lot more work than just changing the law.
But I think saying that the situation on the ground won't change if you amend the law I mean, I think this is a basic human right, the right to employment. And regardless of that, it should be given to people. And it's a big psychological thing. You know, with kids growing up knowing that they cannot work, it affects them very negatively. And I think you shouldn't undermine the effect that that law would have.
Plus, there are all the jobs where you have syndicates, and so.
Can we take a couple more comments, or should we wrap up? Like snippets of comments.
Okay.
Okay, Issam Abu Zaid. How are you, Nadim? I'm from Nahr al-Barid. Just to tell everybody, Nadim, that Fatah al-Islam is not a Palestinian group. This is a point that you haven't aroused. They have come from Tunisia, from Algeria, from Chechnya, from Afghanistan, from the Arab Gulf countries, from everywhere. And there were only 5 or 7 Palestinians among them. So they are away from Fatah, and of course they are away from Islam, which they use as a big logo. The second thing, Nadim, I told you when we first met at Badawi camp, I told you to hurry up in solving the issue of Nahr al-Barid, because it will be a place or a good field for what you called, for the jihadi groups. People were displaced from their camp. They went, lived in, as you saw, Nadim, in garages. In maybe we have 5 or 6 families with about 30 people or 40 people who lived in a house of 3 rooms or 4 rooms. Anyway, so this is something you should do at LPDC, Nadim, to hurry up in building up the camp again. There was a joke when I went to the camp.
Please make it quicker.
Okay, but just let me talk, because I am involved in this issue. Nadim, when I went to Nahr al-Barid, you know that there was no network for the cell phones. The first thing that destruction of the camp brought life to is that there is now a cell phone network in Nahr al-Barid. And the second thing, there was an alley in Nahr al-Barid that at 12 p.m. you have a cave like a cave in the jungles of Africa, and now it is daylight all the time. Also, something about Nahr al-Barid, Nadim, you should have spoken about, that there was 8,000 students going every day to the schools. 8,000.
9, I think. No.
Okay. For the Lebanese Palestinian issue, and this is a final point I will arouse, and I'm not with Tawtin. I will go back, but in 1861 war, Nadim, in the mountain between Druze and Maronites, there were 2 villages, 2 Maronite villages, which were displaced from the mountain, and they went and lived till now in Palestine. Thank you.
But they've been displaced again.
Yes.
Thank you, Issam. I think both of us made it clear that in the Nahr al-Barid war, or incident, I don't know what you want to call it, the conflict, the Lebanese and the Palestinians stood together, and that the danger of that war was that it could have caused a rift between the Lebanese and Palestinians, and it has caused a a lot of tension, which have been dealt with by both sides very well, I think, and prevented an explosion. And it still needs to be dealt with. And certainly there is an urgency to show results in Nahr al-Bared because people there are now skeptical and they don't believe words anymore. They want to see things happening on the ground to believe in it. And I want to say again that I am not here representing LPDC or any government policy. Thank you, Issam.
I'm sorry, we won't be taking any more questions, but thank you all for coming and thank you for your talk today.